Welcome to Build 26, Part 2. I'm just taking the first steps in building my very first glass loop, which is probably going to sound strange to some of you. I mean, usually I'm right up there with any new trend. I was certainly one of the first to start using hardline. But over the past few years, increasingly, I've only been building customer systems. I don't have time to build my own. I can't afford to build my own because everything I do now is completely for the channel. So it means I don't have the opportunity to experiment like I used to. I used to take the opportunity with my own systems to try new things, sometimes, risky things. But, that doesn't mean that I'm not absolutely loving every minute of what I'm doing. I mean, obviously, I always have an awesome build just around the corner. It just means that I am stuck to customer requests all of the time. But, most customers are willing to work with me and do new and different things, but it's just that glass hasn't really been requested until now. And I think what's turned people off glass is when it was first released, well, there's also the whole idea that it could be weaker. It's certainly more brittle, but the borosilicate glass that we use is actually very strong and durable. It comes with the benefits of the quality, the higher chemical resistance, clarity. I mean, it looks amazing. But also at first, you had to use fittings for the bends. There was no bending. And even now, you can get pre-bent glass with 90-degree bends, but there are certain limitations, such as, it's only 150 millimeters from the bend or 200 millimeters, depending on which brand you go for. So that's a serious restriction for larger cases where you might need, 300 or 400 millimeters from the bend on each side. Plus, 90 degrees only accounts for about half of the bends that I do. If you actually have a proper look at my systems, you'll see I do offsets and all sorts of other different things with my bends. So I still find that to be very restrictive. Unless I could actually both cut and bend glass, then I would be more than happy to, I would be using it in every single system. Because I really enjoy what I can do with acrylic tube, the offsets and all, the unusual bends that I do. Now, you can see the setup that I have here for cutting glass. This is a jig that I just quickly built. It probably took about half an hour, 45 minutes to set this up. You don't actually need one of these, but it is good to have a high level of accuracy for cutting glass. It's certainly going to be helpful, mainly if you're building more than one system. I definitely recommend it. The blade is absolutely critical. All of the guides that I've seen for glass cutting show scoring the glass and then just snapping it. That does not work for 16 millimeter. Because the wall thickness is massive. I think it's 3 or 4 millimeters. So you put a little scratch in it, it's not going to do anything. I've tried with the drill and a file, putting a deep score in it. I actually spent 10 minutes as an experiment just going flat out with the drill on a file. And I did quite a deep score, but still when I snapped the glass, it just shattered it all over the place. So nothing that I tried would work. Normal Dremel blades certainly don't work. File, stone attachments, nothing. You need a diamond blade. So that's what I was using there. A diamond blade from Dremel. I'll put a link in the video description. It's a little expensive, but totally worth it because, I've done 20 or so cuts now and the blade still looks brand new. It doesn't wear out like a normal Dremel blade wears out in seconds. This thing just lasts. So it cuts through the glass like butter. You can do a cut and chamfer in 60 seconds. You do the chamfer also with the blade. It works perfectly. This is easy. I mean, if you are worried about glass because of cutting it, well, then don't. Some people talk about building their loop first in plastic. If you're doing bent glass and you're using pre-bent glass, I do think that would probably be necessary. But if you're using fittings for the bends like I am, it's really not necessary. You can just measure things up with a ruler and, go and cut the lengths that you need. And I only had to recut a length one time because it was slightly too long still. And it's so easy to cut it a little bit shorter because if you have the right blade and the right setup, it takes seconds to cut. So yeah, cutting it is really no big deal. And same with chamfering it. But you do have to put a pretty good chamfer on it. It's a lot more difficult to get into the fittings. And I found that without lubricating the ends of the glass, and I use Teflon dry lube for this, it would not go in, and I did get some slices in some of the O-rings. It happened twice where I had to replace the O-rings properly lubricate it, and then try again. I'm set up and ready to fill the loop. Now the coolant color for this build has been much contested. We've had so many different ideas, but we've not really settled on anything until now. And I actually asked on social media a few days ago, and most people said orange, which is kind of the obvious choice, but there's just no way that you're going to match this special effect on the case because it's a chrome orange. And so it would just never really suit. I mean, if you went for, you know, X1, a transparent orange, it would actually, you could get it pretty close, I think, and it would work okay, but I think the most people actually said Mayhems pastel black. Now, I think that is a really good idea for this build because there's not a lot of black, which is kind of unusual. In this build, it's actually more of an accent. There's about as much black as there is silver. So it would add to the accent. I think it would look extremely elegant. I mean, pastel always does, but black in particular in this build would really add to the elegant look. And this build is, you know, really starting to look quite elegant, but then you look at things like the memory and also the fact that this is a metals theme, you know, the special effect on this case, the chrome, basically orange, which is copper. And, you know, it's not entirely elegance that we're going for. We want a bit of flair. Now, because the customer is actually a good system builder himself, no doubt he's going to be adding on to this and changing it and upgrading it. It might even be back for upgrades, you know, in a year or so. I've decided for the very first time, well, it's not the first time, I've actually used this before, but not in any kind of a, you know, permanent situation. I'm going to use Mayhems Aurora. And Mayhems has something new, the Aurora Booster, and what it means is that you don't need to add much, just even a few drops to give the loop a little bit of a sparkle. It's not as if you're using a full-on Aurora with that short lifespan, and if the loop is built right for it, I mean, people are getting 1, even 2 years out of Aurora anyway with the properly built loop. So because of the experience of the customer and, you know, because we're just using the booster, I think we can definitely get away with this. Also, the loop is designed for it. So, yeah, I think this is going to suit quite well. It's going to match the metals theme. So we're all ready to go here, and I've actually decided on a new way from now on of powering my pumps. I'm going to run them directly into the power supply from now on and not have this Molex cable in between because it just adds too much mess. So I'm in the process of making up a converter which is going to run from the pump power, which is now a 6-pin. So what I've used is a 6-pin PCIe because 6-pin PCIe actually fits into 6-pin PSU. It plugs right into the power supply, which means you can then use a 6-pin PCIe female connection on one side and then the Molex on the other so that I can then run it from my external power supply. So, and this is a Phobia external power supply. Now, I don't think you've ever seen anything wrong happen in my videos. And that is because everything usually goes very smoothly because I'm very careful. I triple check everything. I mean, that's how you have to be as a system builder. What you just witnessed is probably the worst disaster that I've had in the Singularity Computers workshop, let's just say since 2015. The green material that you could see in the loop, and you saw it immediately after I switched on the pump, is from the radiators. It is flux from the manufacturing of the radiators. It is not a sign of bad quality. You will find certain material in all radiators, whether it be flux, paint flecks, a little bit of corrosion of the copper, because I mean copper obviously tarnishes and corrodes over time just from touching it. Even if the radiators are sealed up, but most of them are not. After manufacturing, they might be sitting for a long period of time, but whatever it may be, the key is that you need to flush your radiators very thoroughly before you use them, before you even assemble the system. And I always do. I flush my radiators for 30 minutes, about 15 minutes roughly each way, with deionized water, sometimes longer if there's still material coming out of the radiators. And I certainly flush these radiators, and that is why it really surprised me to see that in the loop. And at first I just had no idea where it came from until I had a closer look. I think when I was flushing the radiators, there must have been an airlock somewhere, part of one of the end tanks or something didn't get properly flushed. So yeah, I don't know how this is possible, and it's the first time I've ever seen this happen. I've ever seen any kind of material in my loops with how careful I am with flushing the radiators and everything else. But yeah, this is a good lesson. It's something you need to watch out for. You just always need to flush your radiators, no matter what. I think, some brands actually pre-flush theirs, but even if it says it's pre-flushed, you still need to do it. So because of this, I needed to completely dismantle the loop, dismantle the motherboard monoblock to make sure that I got everything out. Yes, you can just flush the loop. You don't actually have to dismantle it, but I wanted to make sure that I got all of it out. I then went ahead and filled the loop with Mayhems X1 coolant and the Mayhems Silver Aurora booster. But after we had a good look at that, and the customer had a look, we decided that it was a little bit too subtle and it didn't really have the flair that we wanted for this build. And originally the customer had talked about purple. There's a kind of, many unspoken rules that come with system building, and these days at least, one of them is to reduce the amount of colors in your color scheme. I mean, if you just use one color, it really shows a lot of effort. It looks incredibly clean. 2 colors, kind of the same. 3 colors still looks very clean and is more what you would do for a stronger themed build. But when you start to go beyond that, it kind of starts to look like a rainbow, like we used to build systems in the old days. So you do have to be careful. And so I wasn't entirely in favor of adding a 4th color to the color scheme, because we have the copper, silver, and black. It's a metals theme. But we do have the Corsair Special Edition memory in this build with the burning, which is mostly purple, a little blue. It's the kind of colors that you see when you heat titanium and some other metals, which really fits this theme and fits the build perfectly. And so purple, goes well with the memory. So in the end, we decided to give it a try. People often confuse us with modders who do one-offs for shows. What we do is very unique and different. We do this for a living. We do this constantly. We are utterly dedicated to it. We do it every waking hour of our lives, and our priorities are different. If I was building a show system, you would be building something flashy and eye-catching that's only for a short-term use. You're not really worried so much about quality. You're just doing big, flashy mods that everyone's going to love, and you're thinking about your priority is trying to please the people who are going to be looking at the system. Well, with this, it's the customer. The information is for all of you, but the system is for an individual. It's for the customer, and the priority is quality and the individual requests and tastes of the customer. So yeah, what we do is very different, and I often see a bit of confusion surrounding this. But Anyway, that sums up this part of the build log. In the next part of the build log, we'll go through all of the test results and take a good look at the finished product, complete the custom cables. Thanks for watching. Remember, none of this would be possible without our customers and our patrons.